Welcome back to BarryTsGarage. Here's another episode of Ed Smith answering your questions. It's going to be a lot of fun. Ed knows the answers. We just need to ask him the good questions. So that's on you guys. Remember, next time, please continue to ask questions when you see our videos. Gives us an opportunity to find out what you guys are working on, what you're interested in, and we'll do our best. Okay, welcome. Here we go. I've got Ed here. We're going to ask him some more questions you have sent in. And let's see, the first one, pretty simple. Don't pistons have a standard position? In one of our videos, I think it was a Flathead Ford, there were model numbers on just on the top of the pistons, and one of them was oriented the opposite way.
It probably was a casting number or something like that, model number, and it don't mean anything.
Okay.
It's just a part number.
Okay.
And the main thing is if it had a notch in front of the piston, then the notches would all go forward.
Okay. And
that's because the wrist pin is offset to the engine, to the piston bore.
All right.
And I think somewhere along the line, it would just call 26 thousandths off center.
Okay.
Would be normal for a wrist pin to be off center of piston. So that makes that piston goes up and down with the crankshaft, saves a little bit of wear.
Okay, so how many...
And noise too.
So how many engines would generally have perfectly centered wrist pins, whereas which ones were offset?
Well, almost all of them are offset.
Okay.
They have a notch in front of the pistons. But then aftermarket, we get some pistons from aftermarket stuff for flatheads and stuff. There's no markings whatsoever.
Okay.
And we had some years ago with the oil return slot that returns the oil on the oil ring, returns it back into the wrist pin and down the oil pan. That slot was different.
Okay.
So we would have had to put that slot maybe on the bottom of the wrist pin.
Okay.
Because there was more oil on the bottom of the wrist pin as a piston on a V8. Throwing oil around it, so that scooped up a little bit more oil and put it back in the pan.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So the general answer is almost always there is a certain way to orient it.
Yeah,
but
almost
there are
always.
Exceptions.
Yeah, there's always exceptions.
I got you. Okay, now when your engine demo on the engine stand and it turned really slow.
Yeah, that was because of the starter.
The starter was bad. Now someone asked though if you had a really advanced.
Absolutely would. Yeah, but you don't want to. There's a couple of things. If you got a good battery, and the time is at 10 degrees, then it will start up and run fine, perfectly.
Okay.
But just because you have a bad battery, the battery's not charged, you definitely don't want to retard the timing back to 0.
Right.
To get it started, then you have to bump it up to 10 or so to make it run right. Okay. So you don't want to ever, because you got a bad battery, left it sit overnight with the lights on or something.
Right.
And why it won't start in the morning, to start retarding the timing.
Okay.
Or the starter's bad.
Okay.
The other day we had a starter that didn't start right. I think that's the one we had.
Okay.
We had the battery's good, but I took that starter off and rebuilt the starter.
Okay. And then it's fine.
And we just sanded the brush areas and cleaned the brushes all up and done a little file on it and oiled the bushes. It fired right up the next time.
Yeah.
And it works today. Okay. That's our demo starter.
So a little secret there, guys. If a bad starter, it might be possible to get it going again without going off to Napa and buying a new one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. It's fairly easy. It's simple.
Yeah. All right. So here's a more technical question, and bear with me. It's a little bit long. Has Ed ever seen a 283 bored out to a 4-inch bore?
Well, we'll start that. I mean, the question is pretty long.
Yeah.
Yes. But we always took and tried to find the serial numbers and VIN numbers for a truck block.
Okay.
Yeah, the truck block was thicker.
But still a 283?
And I bored a 283 out to 4 inches, ran fine.
Okay. So there were truck blocks that were also 283, but they were a thicker casting?
That's right, thicker castings.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's on truck block and car blocks. And also, while we're talking there, is you go back to our video, we need to find that casting on the front of the cam bearing.
Right. That
circle around that front of the cam bearing, that wear pattern, that the engine's not casted over to one side.
Right. Yeah, that was a big deal.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And today it's a big deal. But that cam bearing and the casting around that should be all the same all the way around that cam bearing and not the cam bearing offset.
Right.
Because the whole block basically shouldn't be bored over 30 thousandths, I would, if that thing was out of shape a lot. So that's the same story.
Okay, yeah. So we did a video on this.
We did a video on that.
And the point is, be picky about a block you use.
Choose a block. That's our first video. Before you do anything, rebuild a motor, you got to pick out the right block.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And they're not all the same, and they're not all cast the same.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. For instance, while you're talking about casting, when you cast a block, of course, they cast them with the pan rails down. And anytime you pour casting something, one of the guys, I think it was one of the engine builders that makes blocks, I think of Dart, I think I had a seminar with him one time. And when you pour the hot casting in there into a block, of course, it's packed in there. And when you pour it in there, of course, it gets higher packed and packed and packed until the best part of that block is on the pan rails.
Wow. Yeah.
Because it's packed in there.
Right.
And I know they shake them to get the bubbles out of them.
Right.
But he was trying to get, and he thought he had it fixed up. Somebody would cast the motor up with upside down.
Right, because
where
it's
he
the
would
top of
cast,
the block that's taking all
that's
the
right.
stress.
And the head gasket surfaces at the top of the block would be the one that has better casting.
Interesting.
He thought he had it done, but I never followed up, and I reasonably think he never got it completed.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's a fast, I never thought of that either. That's interesting.
So that was kind of interesting.
What are your thoughts when you're putting sleeves in engines?
We put sleeves in quite often.
Okay.
Because some of the motors are more expensive now, and it's worth putting a sleeve in it.
Okay. So long-term, a sleeve's not a problem, huh?
No problem at all.
Okay.
We know that the thickness of the sleeve is totally, and you don't have a thing. Some time ago, I had a race car and a sprint car. And a good thing, the driver, I think it was we had that car in the sprint car quite a while. And then the new driver, I think we loaned that motor to him.
Okay.
To somebody here in town, one of the famous drivers. And he ran 2 races. The second race, he brought it in. He said, "There's something wrong with this motor."
Okay.
Good for him. Good for me.
Yeah, right.
We tore it apart, and halfway down the cylinder wall was a dark spot about the size of a penny.
Okay.
And we just took a little wire and stuck it right through the block.
Oh, it was that thin?
Yes. But he noticed that.
Yeah.
Until instead of running it until it flew apart.
Right.
So he's one of my favorite drivers.
So yeah, it's the driver that has what we call mechanical sympathy.
Yes.
He cares about the mechanics.
Yeah, his name was Gene Brown.
Okay.
And he's passed away some time ago, but I think at Manzanita here in town, he won more main events than anybody else.
No kidding.
In the races he raced, yes. But that's who it was, yeah.
Right. Have you played very much with changing heads on different small block Chevys, 283s, 327s, putting different heads on?
Oh, yeah, we do that all the time.
Yeah. What's the advantage of putting a different head on?
It's a compression ratio and the port size.
Okay.
Of course, yeah.
So it's how tight the compression ratio is and how good it breathes, right?
Yeah, right. Okay. And not necessarily is the port size bigger is better. It's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about
Sometimes a smaller port, depends on the cubic inches, the smaller port and the smaller intake manifold, you can get an intake manifold, the ports are too big.
Really?
So then that stops airspeed.
Oh.
Airspeed from the carburetor butterflies down to the valve. And the valve stops, the airspeed goes back up the other way, and the next time it opens, it rams the air into the piston. So that's called ram induction.
Okay.
And that goes back to the Chrysler with the long ram tubes.
Right.
And even in Chrysler, the first ones in 60, they made a short ram and a long ram. They looked the same almost, unless you knew the castings.
Okay, so that was all about airspeed.
All airspeed, yes.
Interesting.
Okay. Yeah, airspeed, not necessarily volume.
Yeah.
And airspeed, you still have to keep the airspeed, the ratio, fuel ratio, the same.
Okay.
To get horsepower out and to get the maximum horsepower out of an engine.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's you have to be careful what you're doing there.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes we have a generalization and it doesn't always prove true.
That's right, yeah.
Okay. Larry said he had a question for Ed. He grew up learning general mechanics because that's what his dad did. He built several different engines, Fords, Olds, Chevy, Pontiac. We had run into a problem, especially on a small block Chevy, and he was taking a worn-out 350 with a stock oil pump, and the hot motor was idling with factory oil pressure sending unit, and the older one with an actual tube coming up to the gauge. Either way, idling hot, 30 pounds oil pressure. After it's overhauled and everything is new, high volume pump, it barely has 9 pounds idling hot. Start up cold, 60 or more pounds, when idling back hot, back down to 9 pounds. He's always heard that it's okay with 9, but below that might start to do damage. What am I missing?
Usually somewhere in that, not necessarily cam bearing. Cam bearings do affect the oil pressure somewhere. But I think some of his problem may be, and I don't agree with high volume oil pumps all the time.
Okay.
For instance, we just had one of our motors that go 10 grand. and a junior fuel car.
Okay.
And it sucked the pan dry and ruined the motor.
Ooh.
And he had plenty of oil in it.
Wow.
There was that much oil in the upper part of the engine.
So that high volume pump is just shooting everything up there.
Everything. It's going everywhere. Plus, it's like taking an egg beater in a battery. If you run that egg beater 5,000 RPMs, the battery's going to be all over the kitchen.
Right.
Not in the pan.
Right.
And that's what he did. It didn't go.
No.
But that was just a month ago, I think.
Really? That's a recent story, not something from
This is recent.
Okay.
That motor goes about 10.5.
Okay.
And it's a fast car.
So again, the oil pump, just because it's high volume, is not necessarily good.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
but you have to keep the oil down.
Okay.
And even on that same thing, we have some of our oil pans that we put on the oil pan gasket.
Okay.
Is a metal comb. And we've said that before. The oil people.
Yep.
My friend and the oil people, he knows everything.
Yeah.
Is the crankshaft supposedly it's like an egg beater. If you spin it to the same speed, the oil picks up on the egg beater and crawls up the handle, and you can empty the jar if you had a precision speed on the egg beater.
Wow.
All the batter would leave the jar.
Right.
So then that's the same with the crankshaft. After 8,000, the oil starts sticking to the crankshaft.
Wow.
As being one big solid thing spinning.
Yeah.
So
everything's moving so fast, nothing can drip down all the way.
Yeah, that's right. So anyways, they have a comb. We've made some of those combs a few years ago, not lately.
Yeah.
As a tin thing that goes in the pan gasket. It all sticks out like a comb, but different sized fingers. And it just misses the crankshaft and just misses all the connecting rods.
Wow.
It looks like a 21-inch comb.
Interesting.
But you have to cut it to
pull the oil off.
Each one to keep the oil off the crankshaft.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, and get it to go in the pan. So that's some of that same thing. It all is the same theory, but I not necessarily like high volume oil pumps.
Okay. Another question. Can you take a 350 small block, 10 over, and cut out the cylinders and make new performance cylinders? He wants a bore of 4.1 or 4.095 or whatever, and whatever would work with new cylinders that fit. I know you can't bore out a 350 stock cylinders beyond 4.06, even if that much. So have you bored out a 350?
Over 60,000?
Over 4.06.
Well, a standard bore is 4-inch.
Okay, so then he's talking
That's
about
only 60 over.
60 over. That shouldn't be a problem?
No problem at all.
You do it all the time?
Yeah, it's only 30 thousandths on one side and 30 on the other side.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's like a couple of pieces of paper.
Yeah, so you would tell him if you have a Chevy 350.
I wouldn't worry about it born at 80.
Really?
But again, you got to pick the right block. Don't pick that block that's off center up in front on the cam bearing.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you have a good casting, it shouldn't be a problem
you got a good centered casting. If that cam bearing is off, that means one side of that cylinders, one side is real thin and the other side's thick on the cylinder walls.
Yep. Okay.
Because the whole thing is casted crooked.
Yep. Okay, now the follow-up is he wants to use a 4-inch crank and make a magic number 421 out of a 350.
Well, that'd be like a crank. That'd be up to him because he's got to buy pistons with the cylinder, with the wrist pins up in the pistons.
Okay.
To run that 4-inch stroke.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it'd be a matter of custom pistons, but as far as you're concerned,
the
doing
pistons match the pistons match the crankshaft.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's not a problem to do
that wouldn't be a problem.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah. But it's going to be probably a hard thing to find.
Yeah. Very specialized.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Here's another one from a gentleman named Jim. Have you ever seen aftermarket small block heads with an angle plug, 2.05 intake valve, and a 1.6 exhaust valve?
Yes.
Okay.
And it says no markings, no casting numbers.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, that's right.
We didn't particular thing. It's just the rules are rules.
Okay.
And racing.
Okay.
With casting numbers. And that's no problem. The rule people sometimes, and they're up to date, I would say.
Yeah.
The tech people. Sometimes they're not up to date.
Okay.
So we were buying heads several years ago from Australia.
Okay.
And we could get any head we wanted. Angle plug, whatever valves we wanted, and they cast them there.
Oh, really?
And they would cast in any casting number we wanted.
Okay.
And they had.
So
if that tells the point, I'm not saying that we cheated or anything, but all the tech crews want to know if you had a casting number in your head, that was okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is not really the whole story, is it?
It's not really the whole story.
Right, right.
But the heads, we got them out of Australia. They were expensive, but
Yeah.
I think some of our heads now, we may have some cast iron heads that we have to run. We used to run them on junior fuel.
Okay.
And the heads were actually casted with the center head bolts were 3/8. Because if you port the intake, it would go right through the head bolt.
Okay.
The two head bolts between the intake manifolds.
So you're so close on the tolerances, you'd have to make a thinner bolt to make room for the
3/8 instead of a 7/16 bolt. Yeah.
Wow.
For the head bolt. Yeah.
Wow.
And then you could port them out whatever you wanted to instead of going through.
Wow.
Then you could get some valves moved over a little bit too.
Okay.
Get whatever you wanted.
Right.
It costs you a little bit of money, but it's still.
But that's all possible.
It's all possible, yeah. So just because there's no casting numbers on them or something, if I found a set of heads that with no casting number, I'd probably buy them.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
They're likely to be good, right?
Yeah, I would do some research on them because they're not just because somebody ground the bolts off or ground the numbers off, and then you can grind the numbers off them and then take a little shot machine or a little chisel gun and put little pivots in it and do a little massage there a little bit where the numbers used to be and make it look like there's no numbers ever in there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you can't say that this has never happened.
No, apparently not.
There's a lot of things that never happen.
No, right.
And I don't know why I don't know anything about it. Okay.
No, you don't speak from experience.
No, nothing.
You're just asking for a friend.
I know nothing. That's like I went to a class reunion one time back in Ohio, and then I think it was a 50-year class reunion, and then the MC was up there and he started reading some things off the note and says, and I think about every other note he had there on his sheet or question, and he always asked, Ed, do you know anything about this? Do you know anything about this happening? And then he said it, Ed, it's been 50 years ago, so he says you can't be prosecuted for things like that.
You can come out with the truth now.
Yeah. I told him, well, I'm already in enough trouble. I don't need to admit to any of the stuff that you have on your paper.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's good.
Things that happen in town.
Yeah.
Late at night, uptown businesses and stuff.
Yeah, things happen sometimes.
Yeah, things happen.
At least you heard about it.
Yeah. Somebody told me that something happened.
That's
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know who come to school the next day with a camera in their pocket.
Yeah.
I have no idea why they did that, but
yeah, you're probably pretty glad there weren't cameras back in those days everywhere.
Yeah, that's sure for sure. Yeah. And then come to after Halloween, there's a toilet in the front yard of the school.
Yeah, okay.
And up on the 2-story, 3-story building, there was a beer and wine sign hanging over the edge of the building.
Wow.
And somebody told me that came from the bar uptown. Behind the bar, I don't know what you signed, but they got up on the school.
Somehow the school inherited
on top
it.
of the school, yeah. The toilet ended up in the front yard.
That's pretty funny.
A few things, but nothing to hurt anybody.
No, it was all
we
good.
wouldn't do that.
No, I'm sure you didn't do that.
Oh yeah.
Well, Ed, thanks for answering these questions.
Good.
We're gonna ask some more later.
Yeah, good. I don't mind it. Yeah.
Okay,
it's
cool.
fun. Yeah.
All right.